All right, here we is. Listen to him fizz. We got the let's see, what was it? It was the brown wire right there that was in the sheath that we needed to replace, plus all the good ones that hadn't been flaky. So what I did was I went into the rigid point in the chassis and snipped them. Yeah, so you get this out of the way. There's that block right there, which is this one right here. That one right there is a 4-terminal block right there, and a 2-terminal block up here that the red one ties to, and they're all noted here. So the only really pain in the butt one is the white wire. That white wire goes back to pin 1 of the LA6 tube, which is that one right there in the middle, and it is buried in there. And that's that's this one right here. It's the longest one. Well, other than maybe the yellow one. I don't know why. Well, it's longer than the yellow. So anyway, we had to go in and snip all the ones in the loom, along with that brown one, which is in the loom, of course, and so we can pull them all out. Now, what you'll have to do is straighten that thing straight up. I mean, get it up there, good and straight. And you may have to go to a little thinner wire. I'm going to use some of my 22 gauge solid. It won't be braided like the originals are, and it'll make for an easier pull through this loom here. Compress it as you're doing it. See how it expands? So compress it down at the beginning, and then keep compressing it as you get that wire in there further and further and further, and pretty soon it'll widen out. Now I had to snip off the end of this a little bit because they had this all soldered up so it would stay without unraveling. So all I did was took my monster gun there with 325 watts of soldering power and stuck it into that thing, and it widened it out, and that's the way I'm going to leave it. So now we're going to attempt to put the wires back in, so stay tuned. I hope to have an arm and a leg left over. Alrighty then, we got her in there. We got all our loom stuffed, and we got our tone switches connected back. It wasn't too bad. The hardest part is getting this loom stretched out, on the ends. The end down here was pretty tight. I had to take my Big Mac and heat it through that hole, and take my long nose and work it a little bit to loosen it up and get it stretched out there, and it wasn't too bad once that was done. Then it's just like I said, compressing this thing up enough to make it wide so that you can stub it through. all I did was I took all the four wires that went into the loom, and I brought them all together nice and good and tight, and I took some shrink tube, just a little bit bigger than what it was, and I shrunk it down to the little tip, left a little bit a tail on the end that shrunk it down even a little, made a little nub on the end of it, and she went right through, no sweat. Connecting it back up. The most difficult thing was connecting the LA6 wire back in, the white wire. It's packed in there in that corner pretty good. So, but we managed to get it in there and get it all hooked in. Now it's just a matter of winding it up, getting the little box put back on the front. These here have little tabs on them. Try not to bend them too much, because if you bend them too much, too tightly, you get that. So I'm going to have to take and go-to glue this portion in a little bit, so that way, if you ever needed to have to open this up again, you just cut the go-to glue and it should come right off. Use anything stronger than that, boy, you're going to have to use a hammer and chisel, and I don't want to have to do that in case I'm the one that has to do it. And then once we get all this sandwiched back together, we can pull the wire back in a little bit through the chassis and get it nice and tight, and then we'll just zip tie it with some tiny zip ties to the sheath here all the way back in, and then that will be done. I decided to take this can dome loose from that screw and take it, because it kept bending on me when I turned the chassis up. So this is safer. It'll keep you from breaking off that lug there, that mounting lug, from the fastener. Just take it loose, spin it around, lay it down against the chassis and tape it. And that will alleviate you having to worry about teetering that thing up, because it will bend on you. I don't care how careful you are, it will bend. So now let's see, let's look at the underside. Let's get this thing up. Get it up. Okay, we got the see if I can keep my fingers out of the focus there. We got the yellow, the green, the black, the orange, the brown, the blue, and the white that went over to there. Now, one thing I wanted to cover, just in case, let me zoom in here, nice and zoomy, zoom. Yeah, see if I can look at the camera and point it in the right direction. See that little blue wire right there? And come on, there we go. That little blue wire right there, it goes to pin 3 over here on the same tube. It ties to 8, and this blue one over here comes over this way and it ties to here. And then this blue comes on over and ties to pin 1 of the, what is that? The LE3. Yeah, the LE3 tube. And they both, that blue from 3 and that blue from this lug, both tie to 8. Now, when I went back in to tie that white wire back into lug 1, pin 1, I found these 2 wires loose, and I thought, Now, I don't know if I knocked them loose, or if I clipped them loose, or what. But that wire, those little wires like that, especially these blue ones, they're solid wire. And if you if they are slightly, I don't care if they're slightly nicked, if you nick them just slightly and you go to bend them, they'll break. So I'm thinking probably originally when they hooked it up to pin 8 there, that they twisted them together and they soldered them to that thing, and they had nicked it, and I probably came along and bumped them and broke them loose from there. So that's just a warning there, because it is really tight in here. Let me zoom back out so you don't have to. There we go. So anyway, that is all done. This is all done. That is done. This is done. Now I'm well done. I think once I get that thing closed up and everything right there, I think I'm about ready to throw some tubes in it and get it checked. So hang on for more action. Alright, we got that thing all dressed up, clamped up, closed up. We got this can dome back in erection, and we're gonna start populating the tubes back in here again and getting the antenna hooked up to it and getting it checked out. We'll check the speaker too. One thing I wanted to cover, there's one thing about these little tips for your soldering gun. These here are probably for a lighter duty soldering gun. I've got the double trigger, double action here, 100 and I forget what this is. I forget what it is. It's over 100 watts. I think it's 70 watts and 120 watts or something like that in the high trigger side. And I've got it in the high trigger side since I had to modify this thing for the foot, the foot trigger. I had to load a new tip into the thing. I forget which model tip this is. I think it's 8120 or something of that nature. But what you'll find is it'll burn them in half if you get to using it and getting them real hot and everything. This here lasted me probably, I'd say, well, probably about 6 months. And you know me, I'm working every day out here that I can. It's getting cooled down now, so I'm going to have to start throwing heat in here. But I just had to load this back up again with one. So I keep spares of these because I don't want to have to take and jump in the car and go down to the hardware store to buy some. If I can find them online and buy them in bulk, I'll just pick up 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 and have them here standing by. Now, that's the only other thing about these things. It'll produce this thin little stuff here, that tip, it'll get instantly hot. I mean, you'll melt that solder, you'll flow that solder real quick. I've seen guys with soldering irons got to hold it there and hold it there and hold it there and hold it there. Well, if you get any significant tie points on especially on a terminal strip, it's going to wick that heat right out of that tip, and you're going to be sitting there holding heat to it. And if it's on a tube socket, you're going to burn that tube socket up, especially if it's phenolic. If it's ceramic like this, it's going to take a lot more heat to damage that. But these here, that there is the trick. Instant heat, boom, 5 seconds and you're out of there. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned. We're going to get this thing in a checkout video yet.